blinking. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Our friend Tam, your friend the Arcturians, your friend Umblam, all speaking together in this wonderful co-creation. Our love, our blessings, our peace, and our great gratitude for you joining us this day, dear Tam. How are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. Again, Umblam, for coming to us. I know it's not our first time connecting, of course, so it's great to hear from you again. And the topic of discussion, as you know, we've decided on is openness, and really just what that is going to entail for many different people, including Mads himself too. Is there anything first you're looking to note on about that particular theme for us?
Well, notice that openness, let's say, exists like most things within a set of parameters or oppositions. So openness also corresponds to, well, what is flowing through this open portal, we could almost call it, and what is it trying to reach? And here we would like to essentially work with these three elements, because you may notice that a pattern that has become active within you, that has sort of been pushing itself into your life, is a type of empowerment, of choice, empowerment of your personality, of your configuration, of your personhood, of you, wonderful Tam, our friend. And so this is the idea that at this moment, we could say you need to selfishly center yourself before you open up to things. So we are actually starting in the opposite thing, the opposite theme, which is that you focus on the receptive quality of you, what it is that you want to invite in. And then you look around and see what framework you have created and whether or not you can be, let's say, satisfied with the framework, the portal, the dam that this thing that you're attracting moves into. And so we would venture to say you can. That's simply to remind you to not be too critical, that you have created quite a happy place or platform from which to further explore opportunities and adventures in this life. So these are the basic elements that you want to keep reminding yourself to set straight. That is, keep honing your boundaries in different ways, returning to this as a type of discipline, meditation, yoga, you could say, a way of connecting to your sacred truth in this life, knowing that that truth is blossoming, seeking expression, and already coming to fruition. So these are all the reminders. And then we would like to ask you, darling Tam, how do you feel about what you are opening up to? What is this great unknown that is out there that is seeking you?
Well, I think that's what I've come to discover, of course. There is always times now where uh, it's almost like expect the unexpected. And this was, well, this current transition was something I definitely didn't expect. But then, of course, thinking about it, the openness came through in that what is meant to be is meant to be in a way. Um, I think my previous interest in a lot around, of course, human performance, and I think the modern term would be biohacking. Um, that has come through recently. That is a new, I guess, opportunity for me to go into my sense of spirituality a lot more in a more scientific way, which is very interesting to me to look into. Um, and I think what I've come to understand is, of course, when it comes to openness, there's always an inherent risk there, uh, of being open, as in a very general sense, but also in the sense of course, you need to take the risk of being open so that things can come through. Could you comment on these similarities between risk and openness?
Yes, it's appreciated that you point out this nuance. See, that is why the term, in at least an emotional context of vulnerability, is synonymous with openness, because it means that you allow for yourself to potentially be wounded. But what makes this possible, let's say, is also a greater confidence. So if we were to take this literally, we could say the greater you get at swords play, the more finesses, the more impressive and risky moves you can also make while wielding your blade. This is a direct metaphor, but that's to say that you have actually grown very steady in your emotional integrity. You have also experienced a lot of emotional upsets, hardships that you have learned to overcome and integrate and actually, well, make, well, harness in the name of both your personal development, but also in the personal development of others. So that's to say that you do have the capacity of regeneration. And this is important to know when you undertake these risks, because then risk becomes more playful. And in the playfulness, there is exactly this idea of, well, we could say a gambit of making a calculated risk in order to attain something, but also knowing that the loss in itself might be a type of karmic experience that is also wanted. So what is really helpful often for human beings in connecting to the other side is essentially also that we constantly remind you of the, for us, completely true and evident fact that you are eternal beings having a temporal experience. And therefore, you can't really be wounded. You can't really take any risks that hurt the truest, deepest parts of you. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of very, very, let's call them, unpleasant experiences from this element. But you can think of it also as, well, the more advanced you become, the greater games you play, the greater risk you are able to simply put into the pot, and the greater rewards you are also able to extract. So there is this element of ascent going on in your life. And in situations such as this one, it's very prudent of you to also take stock of all the development that you have gone through. So we could, for instance, ask you, what lessons have you learned? What have you opened up to? What growth did come of your work with men, of restituting other people in their well-being and sense of self? How have you grown from this?
I think just in general, is learning about the different dynamics that go on from two very different perspectives of men and women, um, and collectively putting that together to create almost like a symphony structure for men as they're going through their own experiences, which I think was incredibly healing, and to look into that a bit more with how relationship structures are different within families and how that gets affected was it was a pleasure to see that and to experience that. You mentioned about the karmic resonance itself, and I did wonder about that when the unexpected news comes. As you said, nothing can really hurt you in a way as you are eternal. Um, just for my knowledge, was there a very particular karmic resonance there of why that did occur?
Well, you had to learn to step into your authority, but you also had to move out of your complacency. These are ways we could say that this specific masculine energy, having that solidified within you, was very important in the unifying processes that go on within you. That is, all of you, especially those we can call light workers, you included, you come here also to heal and restore and unify a lot of energies, a lot of opposites. And as you point to, much has been done in that respect for you. But, well, you may sense then that things come to a closure, a natural cycle of ripening, and then dying off, we could say. And then often it turns into fertilization of a new process. So this is then the question that you also come to is, what is the new process? Because we of course also see many of your themes and archetypes as a spirit feeding into this. But we would like you to play around a little with what pleases you. That is, if you just imagine for a second yourself getting up on a, we could say, a Thursday in late February, and what kind of life or tasks, responsibilities is that day filled with that will see you excited about them?
I think what just comes to mind is learning about the brain, learning about the essence of human capabilities in a very non-spiritualized way, and then essentially meshing those two worlds together to either not create something, but to have I guess, a different perspective on how things are really narrated and run in someone's life. I think in total, yeah, I think in total is just having that more of a balanced perspective on things, and I think, you know, over the years has gone by, and there was limitations within me that said, I can't really go down into the, let's say, scientific field or understand that part, just because of maybe not having a degree or a particular interest in maybe studying science formally in education. So that led me down to a road of different ways of healing, and then of course Matt's came through, and we've been at it for quite a while now, which is I'm grateful for. So yeah, there's just this feeling of harmonizing and accepting the different levels of how I've grown in different places, and just, you know, moving on uh, very well. So I think, yeah, I think whatever this new change is going to look like, it has to go into developing what my knowledge is of around human species, at least.
This reveals a greater, grander theme for you. And so, as we reflect this back to you, we would like you to notice, well, how some barriers have lifted in these senses of impediment in your knowledge and what you could learn about and rightfully occupy yourself with. Well, partially, you may sense that human development is beginning to also in many ways relativize the content of these degrees. That is, you may also consider the actual time that goes into studying any particular subject and earning a degree for it, and then contemplate the time that a person who is simply sincerely interested in the subject would dedicate to studying it. And there you would see that a person who is, well, very interested in the workings of the human brain would easily pour far more time into gaining knowledge about it than a student of general medicine, for instance. So that is to say that the way that knowledge is seen in human beings is changing. You can become an authority simply by following this qualified excitement of yours. And you may notice that this way of learning is often a way where time flies by. So that's the interesting thing, that because you have went to these things you call schools, and we often find them a little misunderstood in their attitudes to learning, because often you develop this sense of performance connected to it, which means that you feel that there needs to be a sense of strain, of sacrifice, of displeasure to taking in information. Whereas you see that there is a lot of information that people enjoy taking in. So you may find people who absolutely detest book learning still having a grand encyclopedic knowledge of what goes on in soccer leagues across the world, and perhaps historically too. So it's simply to say that human beings are generally very clever when they just let go of that type of self-awareness. And there, notice that there is a higher type of awareness that's awakening within you. And this is this type of, we could say, love to what holds you to this incarnation. And these are indeed these loving themes of exploration, of cultivation, of sharing, of healing. And therefore, I am also happy to act as a type of liaison officer, because what has been coming in partially through this session is Syrian codes. It has been, well, mystifying our friend here, as he is not, he hasn't connected to these codes for a long time, but we sense that they do wish to reach out to you. So with your permission, dear Tam, we will connect you to Syrian entities wishing to teach you something about your nature.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mikli Muklok is a name I like to go by, but you can just call me Mick. And how are you, Tam?
I am doing very. It's not often that I connect with the Syrians, which is lovely to have an unexpected guest come through, which is incredible. And on the theme of unexpected positions and and everything going on, I think it's very relative that you've come in. So I do appreciate what you're willing to share.
Well, you may sense that different Syrian entities are reaching out to you. We are essentially a still incarnate race that really enjoys working in medicinal outlooks, in the activation of DNA, and the healing, restoration, and expansion of different physical codes. We will return to this, but first we will say the reason that you do not connect to many Syrian energies is because you are deeply connected to Syrian energies. This blue light energy flows through you, and you may sense that this is a type of radiance, a type of, well, it is connected to the aurora or the light of the morning star, we also sense. So it is this type of healing blue brightness that is informing your soul trajectory. And since we are connecting this day, I'm also an unknown entity to this vessel here. The reason we are connecting this day is because we are connected in the soul group as so-called counterparts, so to speak. And I come to remind you that, well, your trajectory, your mission, should you choose to accept it down here, is exactly this expansion and restoration of DNA. So you are going into working with yourself in this, and you are going to also work with others. This is a very, let's say, important supplement supplementary idea to the ideas of nourishment and sustaining the organism, sustaining health. So you have been going through a lot of balancing of emotional energies, and Well, we could say that what this has led you to accept is actually that you are a very incarnate being, and now you are far more content with unfolding this work of with and in the physical as you go onward.
Thank you for that, and that gives me a lot of certainty to just a new opportunity that has come through with which goes into DNA, but it goes into neurofeedback concerning the alpha and delta waves in human beings, and that also goes into looking into when someone has a Kundalini awakening, what that does to the brain, their brain waves in particular, and how it actually is showcased in a graph in a very physical way. I know this probably wasn't the topic that I wanted to go down, but could you please comment on that particular part of how someone who is having a Kundalini awakening, you could actually see that now? For years now, you've been able to see that on a graph in a very specific way.
Well, this speaks to the very fact that this is a type of somatic process. That what this actually points to is that energy is the primordial soup of existence. And so when energy begins to interact with the physical in different ways, it is easily discernible, even with instruments that are adapted more at measuring the physical than the purely energetic. And we could say the way energy interacts with the human body is in no place more subtle, more nuanced, and more refined than within the brain, because the brain is a type of tuning organ. It is both a transmitter and a receiver. And this is indeed, we could say, the physical underlying reality of that thing that people often call manifestation and connect to the law of attraction. That is that little subset of magic that has to do with you essentially training your brain to focus on things and then allowing the reception of those things to be generated in the wider net of energy. But notice that your sciences are very well aware of this also, that it is not a contended fact that there are essentially mystical forces, or what you call natural laws or the energies that simply exist for the very reason that they exist. And this indeed then would imply, as you are understanding, that the human body is actually able to then interact with this wider field of energy. So notice that all these bits and pieces you are collecting has to do with you understanding that the vibrational adjustment of yourselves and the symbolic way that you do that, that is the way that you speak about the world, measure it, create art about it, create it, so to speak, that actually corresponds to the wider energy field as it measures and intertwines. And this is the way that fate or will is determining how things come to pass. So we hope this may be very complex and therefore you may return to it. But that's to say that you are a type of energy bender, that this is the work that you have come to do. It's a way of you of thinking of this, bending force fields. And what you have been doing with these men is also, let's say, bending their subtle mental force fields in order to create more gentle projections of their own identity and their worldview. And this again then attracts and reshapes vibrationally outer experiences into this greater symphonic orchestration of, well, the experience that the all is having through every one of us.
It's fascinating to hear. So essentially, am I correct saying that, let's say, when you work on someone's DNA, let's say to activate some part of someone's DNA, be it through different means of ways to do that, that person is essentially they're almost upgrading their level of willpower in a way to speak things into existence for themselves, or they're really they've opened up their willpower so that they can fully go into the area that they want to go into, without any risks at all.
You are discovering a great magic secret here, which is indeed that willpower has to do with being able to conduct and concentrate energy. And that is why you usually start these magical or esoteric practices by learning to better control your attention, by learning to also select what it is you want to occupy it with and deselect other things, because this is a basic exertion of willpower. And then as you learn to hold more and more energy, both mentally and physically, because these things are indeed correspondences of each other, you then exactly begin to exert more and more of your true will, your true self, informing the world and rechanging it in that way. And it is orchestrated in that very strange way, which is simply quite not accessible to the human mind to comprehend on your level of understanding as it is, but that everyone following their true will, or realizing, we could say, this vibration of truth within them, is actually, well, for the greater good of everything. So it isn't a selfish act to move towards your inner self, because that's also moving to the greater good for everyone.
Would it be right in saying then that, let's say, when someone is willfully upgraded, I'll say that, to summarize, does the physical perception of their eyes, of like literally of what they see, change as well? Because I'd imagine that, of course, I've seen various different orbs or other things like that when things were occurring with me over the years. Does that just become more normalized with those people who have, become clearer with their true will?
Yes. So you may sense that again, it's this type of expansiveness or add-on. And this is also, we could say, a way where you could tell this from some of the states, mental states, that you human beings understand as pathological. Well, you call them schizophrenia and such, but we could say these type of boundaryless states where people are receiving without having any type of foothold. And here you may sense that, well, there they are thrown as a rudderless ship amongst the waves in a storm. But what you are experiencing instead is that these more subtle, deep realities, these spiritual realities, that they actually come as a type of add-on, but they come in correspondence also with your talents. So you may, for instance, well, notice that, well, the individual that's translating us has a tendency to experience beings in the ethers, which is, of course, why he is fairly apt at doing this type of vocal channeling of interesting disincarnate entities. You may sense that your talents are also moving much into perceiving energy fields. So it is much this discernment of fields, of auras, of floating orbs that is constantly expanding for you. And you may sense that there are greater and greater energy fields at play, because within every situation, there are so many fields at play, both collectively, individually, physically, and mentally, that can be both separated and integrated. And this is something that you are intuitively very good at doing, but that you may sense become something that you can actually at some point reach out or simply use energy from your fingers to transfer and heal and reorganize.
Paints the picture then that, of course, I don't. This could be a false assumption, but I don't believe that everything, in terms of every sort of energy portal that is out there that humans can see, can actually reach correctly. Meaning, of course, there's a clear limit to the human experience. If everyone had the ability to consume the energy that they need to in different ways, I don't think there'd be any more humans, to be honest. So then, I'm just trying to understand, of course, humans can essentially unlock different layers of energy, but then where is that limit that the human experience just can't go past?
Well, it's essentially the dimensional ladder. Well, if you wanted to get philosophical about it, we could often like to do with our friends down here. We could say that, well, when does a human stop being human? Is it when you become immortal? Is it when you become less restricted in your bodies? Is it when you become less avaricious, greedy, or all some of the unfortunate things that you also see human beings carrying out in collective destructive behaviors? What actually constitutes a human? But we would say that as long as you remain in the physical, you are sort of continuing this human project of evolution. And so to that to that degree, you will find that there is still many layers of your DNA to be explored. There are many physical activations to be had. And so you will begin to become more and more like light beings within generations. And this means, well, at some point, and you are asking the vessel here, which experiences he has been having. He has been reflecting a lot on six-dimensional experience, which is essentially these time and space bending entities. Well, the Greys have been doing this, for instance, meaning that when human beings ascend to this stage, they are still physical, but what they are experiencing is more a type of river and time of space that they can select where they want to step into at will. And so at that point, you would perhaps seem more like what you would think of as deities. But to us, you would still be humans. This is very similar to the level where we are at, though we are experimenting more with becoming pure energy grids. That is, you may actually find that there are seventh dimensional entities surrounding you that are made of purely energy that actually encompass your entire reality. They are so big that you can't really see them. This is indeed what you call the soul. This could also be called your seventh dimensional aspect. Then there are higher layers to this that are indeed completely eternal and disincarnate. But so you would perhaps cease to be human at the time you begin to travel in time and space. But that is still many generations away. And for now, you need to unlock a lot of magical abilities of instant creation, of, let's say, levitation, of healing with hands, of longevity, of stewardship of the planet, of remembrance of your soul trajectories, all these 5D etheric projects that you are looking into. And you can have fun with those. Indeed, you will have fun with those.
Do you see levitation being an almost being a skill for human beings to unlock again in the next 100 or so years, or do you see it maybe being further than that in terms of what of when it's commonplace, say, for human beings to do fifth dimensional activities?
We appreciate the humility and cautiousness in your assumption. We sense that levitation is already beginning to be upon you, and well, that means that you yourself personally, we see perhaps learning to master within a time frame of approximately, or master levitation within a time frame of approximately 13 years, beginning in 7 or 8 years to actually experience the first liftoffs. This will have to do also with the changing energies, but you may have felt already that there is a far greater lightness to your body in general compared to, well, what you experienced in your upbringing, for instance, that you already feel severely lighter, more fluttery in your baseline vibration. And this is a sign of this increased magic that is happening. This is also something that then can be physically detected through, for instance, the change of brain wave patterns and other biorhythms in the human system through the increased energy of Kundalini.
Wow, that helps. That helps me understand a few things. There was just one question I had when you said, of course, essentially, perhaps a human being has counterparts according to every dimension, which is visible to, let's say, yourself, but then isn't visible to human beings at this stage. I mean, collectively, what would someone's 12th dimensional counterpart be, in a general sense? Like, what are you, when you do interact with human beings, where do you, or what do you see their 12th dimensional counterpart being?
Well, this has to do with, we could say, the invisible framework of you. That is, there's a deep paradox, which again is also very hard to comprehend for the human mind. But this idea that within the very, 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 very most minute details of how the universe is built, these superstrings that are almost also like, let's call them layered ball bearings, so this continual flow, you may approach it by, for instance, yes, beholding these wave patterns of ball strings. This would be a way of approaching it, but in the incredibly minute. And they have a baseline frequency pertaining to the unique universe of you. So that is that there is a type of complete and total universal creation that is related to you, but that within the 12th dimensional aspect, you would essentially have to return more to the basic frequency of the fact that you exist, that is existence itself beyond everything, to really apprehend it. Whereas we could say in the 11th dimension, you would still have a type of perfected outline. And that is a type of imagining your body surrounding the entirety of all universes, all galaxies that have ever been created. These are all embedded within your experience as you move through lifetime to lifetime. We know these are rather big images, but these are in many ways how reality looks like to us.
So essentially, it's almost, I know you said you stop being human when you time travel, but in a way, it's almost like within the 12th dimensional structure, you're essentially, I mean, of course, you're essentially invisible in a way. You're just, as many people would say, you're just one with the universe, and then that's all the 12th dimension can really be in a way.
Exactly, because the 12th dimension is one of unity. You may even sense that mathematically it has these beautiful proportions built into it, of course, of the 1 and the 2, but well, add those together and you also get a 3. So you have numbers that can stack themselves together in universal creation. The 1 and the 2 and the 3 are basic components that allow for everything else to be. And that's simply one of the many harmonies that's embedded within this beautiful universal frequency.
Fascinating. I would love to know who is there, that you know. If you can tell me at a later date, that would be amazing. But just going back to the central theme of discussion, which was openness itself, I guess when it comes to recognizing human potential, you could only do so much in a lifespan of 90 to 100 years or so. How open do you feel like humans need to be once they reach the end point of their, let's say, human lifetime to, in a way, be successful? of what they've of what they've achieved and what they've learned.
Well, we could say that when you have already ascended to that point, that is not necessarily very visible for many of you old souls, as it is sometimes known, but a type of prerequisite for interacting with this type of practice is the acceptance that there are far greater layers of reality, and acknowledging also the reality of those effervescent and spiritual experiences that you yourself have in your life. And so when you have attained that level of openness, you are essentially able to move through the transmigration between lives without much pain or effort. So let's say this type of, to use an image that from religion, this purgatorial process of being cleansed of all the things that you built up in your life and then having to move into a new one. That passes fairly easily because you are, in a sense, already, as you may sense, you are in this life and in this moment, taking stock of what is happening and connecting to the other side to attract more of your true potential into existence. And that is, we could say, that, well, there will be, let's say, tragic, sentimental pain connected to passing away from this life because it has been dear to you. But there will also be a type of exuberant joy and expectation of the adventures that are to come. So that is, well, where the successful old person moves into, let's say, the cheerfulness that you actually find in many infants, that spontaneous cheerfulness of, wow, I can't believe all the colors and things that are going on here. And there is actually that mental shift. But you may be referring more to as, well, you find yourself in that human stage of being an, you call an adult. And therefore, you may sense that you are fulfilling some of these outer world obligations, what you call success or purpose, so doing something meaningful with your life. And here, well, the question is, have you compromised to satisfy the correct things? That is, there is, we could say, sacrifice, compromise, things that are never ideal, that you move through in your experience. But if you are doing so with the purpose of connecting to something that's true, doing something that's purposeful for you, then you will never quite lose this sense of, let's say, success, of drive. So the true regret is essentially to, well, allow yourself to be chained to agendas that you don't resonate with. And this is sometimes expressed in that harsh term of selling your soul to something.
Thank you for that understanding as well.
But we would like to, if we may, Tam, direct you back to this theme of openness in a more direct way, because we do believe now we have been in the higher dimensions, and there is also information that our friend here can forward to you on those. But we would also like you to, well, practically envision, where do you go from here, so to speak? What would you like to do with your coming days now that your agendas have changed, now that you need to undertake new projects?
Yes, it's I will definitely keep on going back to. But I think yes, my mind is seemingly set in terms of where I feel like the next direction should go into, which is um, understanding more about the human genome and DNA sequencing, and really working with people in that capacity, and however I feel like I need to in the coming years. And once that's over, and I feel like I've done everything I can do there, then I'll move into something else, I think. So I think yes, I think this discussion has definitely pointed me towards that further than I thought I needed to go into, which I appreciate deeply. And that will also uh, give me the risk of going into a different opportunity, which is seemingly quite fragile and disorganized, but something new and beautiful could come across and through that place. So yes, I think that big question that I had at the beginning has been answered, which is brilliant. I think just openness in general. Are you feeling like there is something that, I mean, collectively humans just need to be open more of or about in general?
Well, we could say that there are certain human frequencies that, well, are also being purged, but are difficult to handle, mainly for the collective. We are sensing that, well, you are doing fine in that respect, but the vibration of shame, for instance, is one that is very detrimental to human beings. That is, there is, of course, a type of purpose in, let's say, you censoring unfortunate behaviors that you may have towards each other, by also, let's say, punishing them, by disapproving them, and this may provoke the feeling of shame. But shame is often this type of thing that people carry around that they don't know what to do with. It is almost always unconscious. As soon as it becomes conscious and acknowledged, it becomes seen for what it is, which is a type of, let's say, buildup of deficit. There is a type of energy deficit here, of feeling not enough, feeling like you have to live up to something. And you may sense that this type of deficit, of indebtedness, of feeling that, well, there is something people need to compensate for. This is very shame driven. And these are all feelings that, well, human beings can then, you simply help to alleviate them in others by also, well, allowing for a brighter way of living. And you have done that a lot in working with men, but in connecting to other people. You offer a lot of that brightness, which actually raises the vibration, which eradicates a lot of these unfortunate feelings. And this is indeed a thing that, well, you also feel naturally called and inclined to. So these are perhaps things that you may notice as themes that are valuable to see at play in others that you are working with, helping. But you may sense in yourself that there are perhaps certain physical magics that you would like to connect to. And so, for instance, we are sensing that the mineral of selenite may help you. This bright or whitish mineral connected to the moon, this may help you connect some to your dreams, your visions, and a type of soft allowance in the flow of your life. And what you could do is you could carry it in your pocket, you could place it in your home, or you could place it under your pillow while you sleep. One of these things. It can just be a little token of.
It's interesting because selenite came through a couple of years ago for me to work with, and I think this is just another reminder, thankfully, that you brought through, to make sure that I get some selenite soon, so that I can go into the practice of crystals even more so, of course, which would be great for me. Of course, going back into shame, and I know we've only got a little bit more time together, but going into shame and what we've talked about with the potential work that I'm going to be doing with DNA and biographical feedback and stuff like that. How would you, if you could give almost like graphical point of view of how shame has affected someone's DNA, could that be noticed at all?
Yes. Well, reading energies, you may discern it quite clearly as a type of dimming of people's light. And this indeed actually corresponds to, well, when it is spoken of low and high frequency states or vibrations, this is actually true. And this corresponds indeed to the rotation of the helix on the molecular level, that there is actually a vibrancy that is slower to it. And this means that, well, the natural replication of the mitochondrial structure begins to dim and slow down. So shame is literally killing the organism. It dampens all its vital functions, and it attracts also, let's say, the punishment both in the inner and the outer. That is, there is often a type of inclination towards physical disease related to it. And when this grows too pathological for people, this problem with shame, they often learn very unfortunate interpersonal ways of being where they then try to push shame on others instead. And then you will notice that the shame often very much comes with a physical price, that there will be physical ailments in the wake of this. So this is again also a way where you can then address it in the opposite. That is, if you begin to work on people's vibrancy, these feelings will also come up and be shedded and processed. So, for instance, just performing breathwork techniques or different energy building techniques, it can also be through exercise or laughter, having a good time, doing something enjoyable. All these things are actually something that purges potentially things from the system. And if you make this into let's say incremental avalanche of emotion, so then you actually begin to really, really alter the energy structure, the vibrancy of the individual human being. So that is why it's often also notice why it's the very generic helpful advice to people who are depressed for reasons they can't discern is to, well, begin to exercise, watch what they eat, perhaps get a pet who's also a high frequency stabilizer, who's a happiness instigator in many people's lives. Well, turn the television off. So it's simply all these things could, from our perspective, be seen as very vibrational regulations and helpful ways of viewing how to help people, even those who aren't pathologically depressed but are still struggling somehow, as most people are.
Wow, that's amazing to understand. That's yeah. I'll have to go into this more in more detail when I have more knowledge and of helix structures and stuff like that. And I'll go back to this occasion here just to go back into to if I notice anything different or I'm noticing anything new. Of course, Umblam, thank you, and of course, Syrians, thank you as well for your time. If there's any other lasting messages, then please let me know. Or for the collective here, please let us know.
Well, I would like to leave you with this interesting nugget that if you look into the codons, that is the 64 ways of arranging the different atoms that go into the DNA structure, you may notice that these match the 64 grids that you have discerned within the I Ching and this binary system that you have used to construct models of reality that describe flows of energy in very interesting and to you quite mystical ways. So what this reveals is essentially that, well, through these structures, through both you personally, but also through the energies of the day, the time, the era, the astrological configurations, there are certain of these codon structures within your DNA that are more active, conducing more energy than others. And that is why you may sense that, well, the physical correspondence of, let's say, changes in the overall grid, as for instance, through astrological configurations, they actually correspond to some of the codon structures being more dimmed and some of them being more superconducting. So this is the way that you will discover that you on this molecular level actually generate and conduct energy through different channels that have different vibrational resonances in general in your body. This is indeed one of the secrets of as above, so below. And you can play around with exploring this, because the more you then also confer with the I Ching in working with your body, discerning the energies, asking what you should do to treat your body, to balance your energies, where it wants to go, there you will see that this type of regulation will begin to become even greater, more embedded in your magical practice of exploration.
Wow, that's incredible, and I'll have to review that information again, and really go into that more, as well. And of course, any developments with the I Ching that I find in accordance to the molecular level, I'll make sure to notify Matt as well of that. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I always love these experiences every month. It's almost like yeah, it's almost like a hidden day to discover new things. So I deeply appreciate your words. Thank you so much.
We reflect and receive that love. We appreciate it. And we have very much appreciated growing it with you, dear Tam. Notice that many of these pathways of yours as a healer, as someone who conducts energy into helpful circuitries in the physical, in the mental, in the emotional, restoring the beauty of the human heart. This is something that you are called to, and the light of Sirius will guide you in this as well. And therefore, we have been happy to connect with you, dear Star Brother. And I, Miklamuttok, or just Mik for short, I bid you farewell, and I look forward to all the beautiful work that we will be assisting you in. And thank you for all the beautiful transmissions that you are beaming out to the stars. Our love, dear one.
Thank you.
Hi, hi, Tam.
Hello. Hello. Good to see you again.
Yes,